Finally, in 1922, when the boats are old and crap, those old men from UFC who wanted nothing more than to provide ferry service at a rate of their choosing gave up the racket when the city took control. April 6, 1922, the Christian Science Monitor, New York buys ferry boats. The Board of Aldermen, by a unanimous vote, has decided to buy 9 ferry boats from the Union Ferry Company at a cost of $350,000. Opposition to the purchase developed last week on the assertion that the boats were antiquated and the price excessive. The boats are from 31 to 59 years old, but have regularly passed official government inspection every 3 months. Monday, December 18, 1922, The New York Times. City takes over ferries. Nickel fares restored on Atlantic and Hamilton Avenue lines. The Atlantic and Hamilton Avenue ferry lines of the Union Ferry Company were taken over by the city yesterday, and the operation of the Hamilton Avenue line transferred from the old Union Ferry Terminal at the foot of Whitehall Street to the South Street Municipal Ferry Terminal. Grover A. Whalen, Commissioner of Plants and Structures, met the employees of the company in the municipal building yesterday morning and announced to them that no one would be thrown out of work. Contrary to the expectations of Commissioner Whalen, the Union Ferry Company sold their 9 boats to the city for $350,000, which was the price the Department of Plants and Structures had set 8 months ago. This will enable the city to operate the lines with the boats heretofore in use instead of using chartered boats. The 5-cent fare was resumed on the lines yesterday, and the standard vehicle rates established. Commissioner Whalen said that he had decided to run 1 less boat on the Sunday schedule of the Atlantic and Hamilton Avenue lines. The Greenpoint Ferry, championed by Alderman McGinnis when not raiding the apartments of Chinese people, held out until 1933. In 1932, the New York Times reported on McGinnis's saving the line. Thursday, June 9, 1932, Tsar of Greenpoint saves her ferry. McGinnis makes appeal, and plan to end service is tabled until fall. Mayor suggests solution. Commissioner Goldman and civic groups vainly present economy argument to commission. There was dancing in the tortured streets of Greenpoint last night, and wassail in her happy homes. Lights winked gleefully across the river to the brooding monolithic towers of the west. Children played in the gutters, electing mayors, governors, and who knows, even a president some not distant day. For once again, the Metternich of Greenpoint, Peter J. McGinnis, had triumphed. Czar over his homeland acres and assistant commissioner of her public works, the McGinnis yesterday pleaded for the rights of his people. Downtrodden they are, without subways, and Democrats without disloyalty. They viewed the project to abandon the East 23rd Street ferry with alarm, in which there was mixed just the faintest trace of despair. Never, said their leader, should those propellers stop churning the yellow waters of the East River. In a half-hour speech before the Sinking Fund Commission, which was considering dropping the service, the McGinnis stated his case, and the case of the Democrats. He pictured the people of Greenpoint, widows and orphans who spend their days waving the American flag, and then cast a shuddering glance in the direction of a Greenpoint without a ferry service. Tears filled his eyes, and his voice shook at the thought of what would then happen to the garden spot of the world. Preceding him were statisticians representative of civic organizations who told the commissioners that the ferry was losing money, should be abandoned. He heard Commissioner Goldman of the Department of Plant and Structures say that it ought to be laid up forever, its keel turned to the sky. The statisticians pointed to a 9-year deficit of $1,179,459, but the McGinnis merely pointed to Mayor Walker. "You must be the proudest man who ever sat in that chair," he said. You have just left the hot seat over at the State Building, and you have come through with flying colors. They found out that not one nickel of the taxpayers' money had been misspent. Let them tell that to the governor. I'm a state committeeman, and I'll tell him myself if they don't. There was a moment's silence. I give you my pledge and the pledges of 11,000 Democrats of Greenpoint that we will always be behind you, will stand with you, or will go down with you. He finished, and it was as though the wind had died. Not a sound was heard. The commissioners thought deeply, and the statisticians looked upon their figures darkly. The McGinnis sat down and wiped a tear from his eye, and Mayor Walker suggested that the whole matter be put over until next fall. I'll be upstate about that time, picking out a governor, remarked the hero of the day. We won't do anything without your cooperation, the mayor said. But less than 1 year later, the fight was lost, and Greenpoint was again plunged into commuter oblivion, a backwater of the city, inaccessible by water. Friday, February 10, 1933, the New York Times. Greenpoint Ferry suspended by city. McGinnis loses long fight to keep line going. Service will end tomorrow evening. Suspension of the ferry line between East 23rd Street, Manhattan, and Greenpoint, Brooklyn, was ordered yesterday by the commissioners of the Sinking Fund. Peter J. McGinnis, Assistant Commissioner of Public Works of Brooklyn and defender of the interests of Greenpoint, his home community, made a final plea to save the line, but Mayor O'Brien insisted it must go as an economy measure. The Commission's action marks the withdrawal from the service of the second ferry in 2 weeks, the service between Atlantic Avenue, Brooklyn, and South Street, Manhattan, having been suspended for 3 months, also as an economy move 2 weeks ago. Albert Goldman, Commissioner of Plant and Structures, announced that the last boat on the Greenpoint line would make its trip between 8 and 9 o'clock tomorrow night. Posters notifying users of the line of its immediate discontinuance will be put up this afternoon. The suspension will mean a further layoff of men working for the ferry division of the Department of Plant and Structures, but Commissioner Goldman said he would not know for some time just how extensively the layoffs would be or when they would be made. Mayor O'Brien announced that a rather attractive offer had been received by him for private operation of the Greenpoint line, but he said it would take some time to study its terms and determine if it was actually workable. It developed later that the offer had come from Eads Johnson, expert on the staff of the Citizens Budget Commission, who first made his proposal 2 weeks ago. I appreciate what this ferry means to labor and to some of the people of Greenpoint, Mayor O'Brien said, but we find it lost $81,339.79 last year and carries only 1,000 fares each day. We are trustees of the public's funds. We are trying to save hundreds of thousands of dollars, and we shall squeeze every possible nickel in expenditures. The mayor said he was keeping in mind the possibility of putting tolls on the East River bridges. Until 1942, the city's ferry system continued dying, and then was no more. In spite of public pleas, including invoking the necessity of wartime. Saturday, August 8, 1942, the Brooklyn Daily Eagle says continuation of all ferries is necessary wartime precaution. To the editor of the Brooklyn Eagle, having read your article relating to the Atlantic Avenue ferry, it occurred to me that this conveyance, as well as all those laid-up ferries, should be kept in running order just in case air raids actually occur and wreck our very few lines of contact with the rest of the country. Long Island is thickly populated, and should a hasty movement of its people inland ever be necessary, I can see nothing but confusion, congestion, and panic through the existing channels. Continuance of this ferry, as well as all others, I believe necessary as a precaution for the duration of the war. Brooklyn, August 3, Long Islander. A sad coda was printed in 1956. Thursday, September 20, 1956, The New York Times. Old Ferry Terminal doomed in Brooklyn. Work on raising the abandoned Hamilton Avenue Ferry Terminal at Buttermilk Channel, Brooklyn, will begin early next month. Vincent A.G. O'Connor, Commissioner of Marine and Aviation, yesterday announced the award of a $12,750 contract to the E.P. Reynolds Corporation of Cedarhurst, Long Island, the low bidder, for the removal of the structure. Work is expected to be completed early in December. The present terminal building of the old Hamilton Avenue Ferry was built in 1906. The line which linked Brooklyn with South Street in Manhattan was operated by the Union Ferry Company until late in 1922, when the city took it over and ran it until June 30, 1942. The long-range waterfront development plans of the department include a new shipping terminal at the foot of Hamilton Avenue in Brooklyn. The $3.5 million terminal, according to present plans, will be started in 1959 and completed in 1961. Regarding paying for public transit, as explained by Occupy Wall Street more than a decade ago, the rich are massively profiting from our transit system, despite the fact that buses and subways are supposed to be a public service. The government and the MTA have turned the system backwards into a virtual ATM for the super rich. Instead of using our tax money to properly fund transit, Albany and City Hall have intentionally starved transit of public funds for over 20 years. The MTA must resort to bonds, loans from Wall Street, to pay for projects and costs. The MTA is legally required to funnel tax dollars and fares away from transportation costs and towards interest on these bonds called debt service. This means Wall Street bondholders receive a huge share of what we put into the system through the Metro cards we buy and the taxes we pay. More than $2 billion a year goes to debt service, and this number is expected to rise every year.